might want to listen to it later, so you can maybe do that if you want to. Okay, so I'm going to try and keep the presentation brief so that we have time for discussion. So we want to propose sort of a first step in 2 or 3 sort of phases of changes that we want to implement in Labour Board with specific goals. So I'm going to go through that quickly. If my slide, okay. So, as we all know, and it's also been highlighted in a recent research study by a registrar, is that we have major concerns in our Labour Board with regards to specific. There's multiple concerns, but the ones we want to highlight today is the management of intrapartum patients, specifically. Then the suboptimization. Suboptimal use of the caesarean theatres, specifically not utilizing, for instance, the elective side for emergency caesars. There's also concerns about miscommunication between the different healthcare providers in Labour Board. So that includes the consultants, registrars, MOs, nursing staff between us.
Sorry, just a minute, Prof. Wouters with his hand up.
I just want to say we can't see your slides. I think you mentioned.
Oh. Yes, I forgot to share it. Sorry. Yeah. You must see my slides. Can you see it now? Wait. It's coming. Okay. Now you can see it. Okay. Prof. Wouters, can you see the slides now?
Yeah, we can see.
Okay. So we were at the beginning of the discussion.
Unfortunately, it wasn't my glasses. It was.
No, it wasn't your glasses. Okay, so we're talking about the problems with intrapartum management of patients and communications around booking and utilizing the caesarean section theatres in Labour. That's the 2 focus points: intrapartum management and use of the caesarean section theatres that we have available. With regards to the research that was now recently sort of done in our Labour around HIE, we all know what HIE is. Just for interest sake, in Canada, the rate of HIE is around 1 in 1,000 live births. In America, about 1.5 in 1,000. Saudi Arabia, which we can all agree we would say is a developing country, it's close to 8 in 1,000 live births. If we look at the Tygerberg Hospital stats, we look at the babies, or not we, but colleagues look at the babies admitted to ICU for head cooling. So that's the ones that's definitely most likely going to end up with significant HIE in 2 years. And the average was, if you look at term deliveries, it's 9 in 1,000. So if you compare it to the other stats, you can see that it's a very high number. And then all the deliveries, including obviously the premature babies, it's lower. And this is actually possibly even a sub-representation, because it doesn't include the stillbirths that occur due to intrapartum asphyxia. The avoidable factors that was identified specifically in our Labour Board, I just want to, before I mention them, I just want to say that everybody involved acknowledges the fact that our Labour Board is under extreme pressure with regards to resources, staff, beds, etc., and how this impacts the above factors. But the fact of the matter is there were avoidable factors identified in these cases, and the dominant avoidable factor identified was actually the healthcare worker. So the things I want to go through them because it's very important. So this now obviously points towards the part of the discussion around intrapartum management. So failure to identify or react to abnormal CTGs, fetal distress missed due to no monitoring during intrapartum phase, inadequate clinical assessment or management, poor or incorrect partogram use, and incorrect use of oxytocin. So just note healthcare workers, so that obviously includes all the healthcare workers involved, not only the doctor. And then the health system delaying getting to theatre. We know that we have had poor outcomes because of that as well. So we want to suggest a plan that we've been thinking of for quite a while, And we've discussed this with the different role players. That includes the anaesthetic team and the nursing managers, both in theatre and in labour ward. And the good news is that this plan was sort of decided upon or created with all the members involved. So there's quite a positive feeling around it with regards to nursing involvement, which is always a good place to start. So the idea is that we want to reorganize the labour ward floor and how we run it in a day-to-day sort of way. And what we want to do is we want to deliberately shift the focus in the labour ward to, we know the registrar is supposed to be the leader of the team, but we want to highlight that again, that the registrar is the absolute leader of the team, the manager and the main communicator that should have a holistic view of the whole labour ward. And then the shift towards the care of this intrapartum group of patients, specifically in the delivery rooms, based on these stats that was now obviously found that's concerning. And then as a side sort of fact, also improve how we organize and plan our theatre cases and communication around theatre cases. So how can we do that? So our suggestion is to move the center, or what I like to call the heart of the labour ward, to the area in the corridor just outside the labour ward. So you might have seen, I've got a photo, you might have seen we put up the boards just outside the theatres. We put up a shelf there, and we want that to sort of be a physical representation of the fact that we want this now to be the starting point and the meeting point and the main hub of where the decision making and the communication occurs in the labour ward. It's also physically in the middle of labour ward. If you include the theatres and OCU, it's actually the centre of labour ward. So there's two large boards now up, as you see. The idea of these is we've got lots of big ideas, but as a basic plan we want to implement that we put the theatre list, especially the emergency theatre list, in the order of the cases must always be updated on that board. So that is so that when, because it's just around the corner from the theatre, so if the theatre staff comes out and they want to send for the next patient, they know exactly who to send for. And on the elective side, that they also get into the habit of coming to check there if they must send for one of these patients before they send for the next elective. So that's why it must be absolutely updated, because that is what will then be used instead of sort of walking around and struggling to figure out who must go next. We thought that we could also put the names and the cell phone numbers of the registrar in charge for the shift up on that board. In the day, it will be the same person for the week. After hours, it will obviously be a different person, so that everybody also know exactly how to get hold of the person in charge of the labour ward management for that shift, which is obviously the registrar. We also suggest that the rounds will then start 8 o'clock and 4 o'clock. We'll start there. Everybody will sort of have their first initial discussion there at that board. And we're going to, in the next slide, I'm going to discuss then our suggested sequence of events then in the labour ward with regards to the ward round. So if you now imagine that the ward round now starts in front of this board, that you then briefly discuss. So instead of starting at the red rooms and sort of slowly making your way through the whole labour ward, seeing the delivery patients quite late in the ward round and not always being up to date with exactly what's happening, sort of a disconnect. We experience a kind of disconnect between what's happening in theatres and what's happening in the labour ward because of physical distance, etc. So that we then suggest that you start at the boards, you briefly discuss the theatre cases pending and the planning around that, and then moving to your acutely unwell patients. So the registrar should obviously know who they are. They can be in any bed in the labour ward. So that would be the people that's waiting for OCU kind of level of care. So the very unwell patient, not the average red room patient. Then move to your patients waiting for theatre with suspicious CTGs, etc., so that you can just reconfirm that you are utilising the theatre optimally, and then make your way sort of from this board, but then instead of starting at the red rooms, you then start from the board and you actually see the delivery rooms and end off with the red rooms and orange rooms. The idea with that being that the focus is then on the delivery patients. You see them earlier on the round when everybody has got more energy and more time. And we feel that the decision making in those rooms are much more time sensitive often than in the red rooms. And we can maybe reprioritize the theatre cases and intervene sooner in those possible HIE cases if we see them earlier on the round. With this, we also suggest a shift in the focus of the responsibility of the registrar and the MO. So I think that is probably the biggest change that we are suggesting from a practical point of view. So we know that on paper, the registrars should take responsibility for the whole labour ward, but we do obviously acknowledge that it's very challenging because it's very big and there's lots going on, but we want to re-emphasize that move towards the registrar having a holistic view about everything that's going on. But we want to suggest that the registrar focuses on firstly, the acutely unwell patients. So that's not the so-called red room patients. That is the 1 or 2 sickest patients in your ward, maybe with shortness of breath, HELLP syndrome, abruptio, those, the very, very sick ones. And that the focus is then actually on the delivery rooms, which will be the closest rooms to this board where you will spend time sort of planning your labour and how you do it. And in the antenatal rooms on your left, obviously 1 and 2, those 2 rooms will overlap between the registrar and the MO. But the registrars, except for the acutely unwell patients, the registrar will very much focus on the delivery rooms. So I want to reiterate that this has got nothing to do with the fact that we feel that the registrars can take better clinical care of the patients in the delivery rooms compared to the medical officers, because we all know that often medical officers actually have much more years of experience and they can take care of those patients very well. It's not about MO versus registrar. It's about the focus of the time and the effort and the prioritizing in the labour ward shifting towards the delivery rooms, which will happen as a consequence if the registrar is on that side and the round starts on that side. So I hope everybody understands what we're trying to achieve with that. And obviously to keep that boards updated will be an absolute priority because people will now use that sort of all the time. Oh yeah, and what I wanted to add is another benefit of this system will be, you might have seen that the Sister Prince put the theatre book on that shelf at that board. And what she says is they've got a big problem that the patients are, according to them, not booked for the theatre cases. The Caesars are not booked all the time. So what they suggested is that we just then, when you go and discuss the patient and book them on the board, that you put a sticker in the book. You don't then have to phone. You obviously still have to phone the peds, but potentially if you're standing at that board, you can just also walk in, speak to the needs, speak to the pediatrician that will probably be around there at the theatres, put the sticker in the book and put it in the board according to sequence. So you won't have to make all these different phone calls because everything will be centralized there in the middle. And then with regards to the medical officers, we know that you should also be part of the team and the whole labour ward should be in your mind. You should work where it's needed, but that we want to shift the primary focus of the MO then to the red rooms and the C2A admissions area, where we hope that the intern can then present mostly to the MOs, which will then be closer to them, and that the MOs can then sort of work between the red rooms and the admission area sort of fluently. And then obviously the antenatal room 1 and 2, as I said, overlap. So that will depend how busy the delivery rooms are. But we don't obviously want a line in the middle. This is your job, that is your job. So I think it's a good idea that there's an overlap area in the middle, but the main focus starts in the delivery rooms for the registrar and starts in the red rooms for the medical officer. I just put in a slide about the consultants because obviously we are part of the team. So for the consultants, we speak to them separately in the meetings as well, but the idea is that they must be actively involved in all of these systems. I think there will be a fluency when you've got a more involved consultant for the day. They can obviously assist more, but it will still be on paper the registrar's responsibility. We don't want to give the responsibility of managing this board and this admin over to the consultants because there's so many different types of approaches from the consultants. So I think it will stay with the registrar, but the consultants will definitely be closely involved, especially, for instance, the theatre consultant for the day. So briefly, the possible advantages of this new system is that we have buy-in already from different stakeholders. I mentioned the distance, it's central. It might optimize the communication between theatres, OCU, and the delivery rooms and the decisions around that. More focus on intrapartum patient care, and we feel that this will also improve the booking system efficiency, because you just have to go to one place, put the sticker, pop in your head, speak to your colleagues. It will also hopefully improve the one-on-one communication between the registrar and the labour ward anaesthetic registrar, which there's also quite a lot of a breakdown in communication. Possible challenges that I thought of is obviously resistance to change and buy-in for all the reasons that we might have. So I just said we request open minds to think about this. We all know that things need to improve. We know we need more staff and more beds, but we are more thinking of what else can we do while we are trying to get more resources on board. It might be, I thought, people might feel that they must walk further distances, that might take time. I don't think so, but it's maybe a consideration. And then also the time it might take for the registrar to keep this board up to date, but in a sense, it's already happening to a large degree. So I think if it's managed correctly and you just update sort of the first 2 cases regularly, I don't think that should be too difficult, but the time issue is obviously always there. So we want to start with this implementation of this shift actually next week, Monday. I've discussed with the people working on Monday already that they can obviously be on board, and then I'm going to be there then from Monday to Friday to just sort of help with the logistics and all of that. If we don't get overwhelming sort of a negative idea from the registrars and EMOs today, because obviously we can't implement it without everybody involved feeling that it's worth something to try and implement. So yes, so we want to do that next week. And then for the so-called next phases, things we are thinking about for the future, but I don't want to focus on that because I think we just need to start with the already mentioned things. But the things we thought of for the possible future will be things like swapping the rooms around in labour ward so that the red rooms are actually closer to the board, and then the back rooms are actually the so-called chair room and antenatal room. So basically swapping the acute rooms with the stable rooms. But that has got pros and cons, so we're still thinking about that. And then also the implications of possibly swapping the MO permanently outside into admissions, and then the interns work inside. That's something we've always talked about on and off, but we're not going to now implement that change as part of this first phase of our suggested plan. But just that you know, those are also things that we're always discussing. It's not new ideas, but it could also form part of the long-term plan. So that's my story, and I think we can now open the floor for questions and discussions around it.
Thanks, Esty. Yeah, so please, for discussion, can I just add 2 things? The one is that the average payout for a cerebral palsy case at the moment is 30 million rand, and each one of these cases that are audited are potential cerebral palsy cases. So it is a lot of money that's involved, almost more than the health budget. So it is important that we try and change this. The second point is I'm working with the VULA people. I'm trying to get the whole obstetric and gynae system in the Western Cape to use VULA, so that all that levels of care and everything is in VULA. But then in the end, the referrals to labour ward from the MOUs will also be with VULA. And the consultant on call for labour ward can then do this on his phone wherever he or she is, and get that appropriate referrals and just update the board as we go along. So hopefully that's something also in the future. So if there's any discussion, please use the chat function or raise your hands at this stage. You've stunned everyone in silence, it looks like.
I would like to say something. It's William Kavea. Yes, there is something that maybe also in the terms of running labor ward we are not looking into. It's like the communication during CSER, like between the different teams, scrub sisters, anesthetist, and the medical officer or the resource operating. I think I've been in some provincial and district hospital where they are running some theater for Caesar. I don't know how far can our department push so that we can have scrub sisters that are rotating so that they don't complain about tiredness. Because we've seen like us, we can cut as long as we can. We don't have a problem, but always this is a challenge. You'll be pointed by the finger saying that this is the doctor that doesn't give sisters break, and then it becomes like a problem. They talk about that among them, and when you come, they know that this will not have so how far can we go to the point of having two teams rotating? This is a big hospital. We need to have two teams of scrub sisters rotating during the night. They break at the time, and then the other team comes, I don't know, from 10 until the morning or from past midnight until the morning, then it could work properly. The other challenge is with the anesthetist also. If we could address this, it will help us in terms of communication. I know our register come always to discuss the next patient for Caesars, but sometimes it ends up by bringing some discussion between the medical officer who's cutting because just the patient has not been booked. I know it's a small things, but sometimes some anesthetists bring this as a big challenge to them for continuing the Caesar. That was my point at this time.
Thanks, William. I'm noting that. Let's go to the next one, Ronia.
Morning, everyone. Thank you so much for the presentation. My point is actually almost just the same as Kabea, but as far, I think I haven't really been doing theater like the cutting person, but I think I did experience there's a lot of resistance when it comes to theater, and sometimes I feel it's not really the registrar who's in labor ward who's actually in charge of theater. I got to feel like the theater staff decide when they want to cut and who's urgent and who's not urgent, which I feel it's a little bit it's inappropriate for them to decide that no, this one is not urgent, no, that one is elective, no, we are not going to cut. Of which I understand people need a break when you are cutting and there's a lot of cold cases and things like that, but I don't think it's for them to decide which one is urgent and which one should actually be done like right now. We all get tired at some point, but for the sake of the patients, I think we need to just do what we have to do. Sometimes you find that it's actually not even the people who have been working throughout the night. Sometimes it's people who are starting just 7 o'clock in the morning. Find a Caesar, they are already complaining, and you wonder what happened. The person just started, they are fresh and all that. But I can tell you there was a case where we had an emergency at 7 o'clock and the anesthetist was very angry that we have a Caesar in the morning, and I couldn't understand it. And unfortunately, we delivered a stillborn baby. I don't know if us doing a Caesar earlier would have made a difference or not. But when I asked, what would you have thought if this was you and we are telling you, no, we cannot do a Caesar because it's 7 o'clock. And the answer was that I would actually want a fresh person to come and cut the Caesar because then there's less complication. The conversation ended there, but really I think the theater staff should actually be made aware that we wouldn't want just to cut throughout the night if it's not necessary. We wouldn't request for a second theater for them to help us if it's not necessary. So sometimes I feel maybe they don't really understand that, and there's just a lot of misunderstandings among the theater staff and the labor ward team.
Thanks, Ronia. I'm going to give Lucinda first a chance and then Estie.
Morning, everyone. Thanks for the presentation. Estie, can you hear me? So I think the arrangement will work, Estie, but I just wanted to say with regards to the interns presenting to the MOs, personally, for me as the reg on the labor ward floor, I would prefer all presentations to me unless they can't be found. And I just think
It's some of the MOs do have more experience, but it is at the end of the day, you did say the reg, it is our floor, and I would prefer all presentations personally to me. And with regards to the working relationships with MOs and regs, I also think considering how MOs and regs work together and the organizations of the team is a big factor, because some people don't get along. Some of the MOs don't alert the regs if they need to, and it's a big factor concerning the dynamic of how the labor ward floor is run. And then obviously, as usual, nursing staff is a very major factor, which is something we need to work on as a labor ward team. Thanks, that's all.
Thanks, Lucinda. Esther, your answer?
Hi, sorry, it's me, Cecil. Just a quick comment on the theatres. So we know that there's lots of challenges there and the staff issues and shortages, but I do think that this is at least a start to an attempt to improve communication. And I think if the theatre is also better aware of how many cases are pending and what are the emergencies, and we just improve the communication with them, hopefully that will also help with some of those issues that you experience through the night. And then, yeah, Lucinda, so I think, you know, every labor ward team can also obviously decide amongst themselves how, you know, some of the further detail regarding to the intern presents, and that would be up to you. But I think it's important for the teams to sort of try and work together and communicate how they plan on approaching the night or the shift that they're doing.
Yeah, I also think it's not necessarily the intern presenting to the MO, it's that the shift of the triage in front rests more on the MO than on the intern, but that's the next phase of implementation, so we're not there yet. Because we really need a more senior person in triage, we need the intern in labor ward. But that would be a next step, as Esther said in the presentation. So for now, we're discussing the buy-in for the suggested order that Esther has presented. The challenges with scrub sisters nursing, there is a team that Liesl and Esther leads that discuss that with theatre and with scrub. Sorry, there's a lot of noise from the workers outside, so it's difficult to hear myself. We will take that further. So are there any further comments before we close this part of the meeting regarding the shift next week and the implementation? Is that, I can just see 1992, with your hand is up.
Hi, it's actually Kaylin. Sorry. So I just have the arrangement is, I mean, I don't think it's really going to adjust everything because we are essentially a team on the floor in terms of the registrar, the MO. We go to all the rooms, we do all the deliveries together, etc. The main issue that we found is unfortunately the nursing staff. Last night was in point. Whatever you prescribe or order does not get done. There was magnesium sulfate, no urine output recorded, 3 acute severes, no Adalats given, no doctor alerted. The medication you prescribe does not get given. You give any order to any nurse and you come back an hour and a half later and nothing's been done. CTG interpretation, I mean, you're busy with a sick patient in the front and the CTG is decelling in the antenatal room and not a single midwife or nursing staff alerts you. So in terms of the order of the labor ward, I mean, with regards to registrars and medical officers, I think we always work as a team, but it seems that majority of the problem that we are encountering is actually coming down to the nursing staff, unfortunately. And that's all I have to say.
Hi, Kaylin. I'm still going to start talking. Thank you for your comment, and we take from this meeting that there's serious concerns with regards to nursing care, and that is a part of this discussion and also separate to it, but we take absolute note of that. I do want to comment that for us who sort of work with multiple teams, it's not our experience that most teams work together as a group necessarily very well, that there's often quite a divide between the red rooms and the delivery rooms, and the delivery rooms are often sort of a last thought on a ward round, and I include everybody in that. We all sort of tired by the time we get there. So it's different teams work differently, and I'm very glad to hear that you work together with your medical officer as a team, because that's ideal, but that is not what happens all the time. And I think we have to think of sort of the larger group and how to improve it on average for everybody involved. But yes, I hear you, and this is obviously, this suggestion is not going to address the nursing staff challenges. That is a separate set of very serious concerns. Hoe is die gaan nou afgesny is nie? Dink jy so? Dat ek maar oorvat.
Ja, Stefan?
Hello, yeah. So sorry, colleagues, I said it's 8 o'clock. We need to finish this part of the meeting. You can just follow the comments on the chat as well, and we'll continue this as an email discussion. I'll put this online, so for those that we weren't able to attend, you can just have a look at this. And at this stage, let's focus on what we can do. There are many things that's outside of our control, like nursing, which we can continue to discuss, but we will have to get nursing to challenge that, or to take up those challenges. When you do find, Kaden, something like that happening in the night, please just send us an email. We can't do anything without having that complaints on writing. If it's in writing, we can take it to top nursing managers, and they can do something about it. So every night, every morning, when we do the handover, we discuss the problems in the night, we put it on that form, but if it's not in writing, we cannot take it any further. Esther Liesel, your hand is still up.
No, I'm sorry, it was accidentally up, but I just wanted to end off by saying that we will appreciate any emails or discussion about ideas around it, but otherwise the plan is then to trial this next week for the week, Monday to Friday, and then we take it from there.
Thank you very much, everyone. I'll send out the email and we can continue the chat on the email. Thanks, Esty, for the presentation.